How's it going, Ann Camp? This is Justin Gibney, president of the Ann Campaign, and this is another civic update where we are trying to raise civic literacy among Christians so that as we go out and engage the public square, we can do so in a more informed and effective manner. And today I want to talk a little bit about the subject of imprisonment in America and the First Step Act. So my Bible readers know that Scripture is full of examples of individuals who were falsely accused and unjustly imprisoned. Think about it. Joseph, falsely accused and unjustly imprisoned. John the Baptist, imprisoned and executed, right? Jeremiah, Daniel, Apostle Paul on several occasions unjustly imprisoned. And of course, Jesus, who was unjustly apprehended and executed. If for no other reason, Christians should take criminal justice and imprisonment more specifically very seriously. To take away someone's God-given freedom unjustly is surely a grievous offense. And on the other end, because we know justice has two sides, to not protect victims by punishing those who are victimizing people and committing crimes is also an offense. And so we have to go into this criminal justice conversation looking at both of those things. And unfortunately, sometimes on one side or the other, sometimes we only consider the victims. On the other side, sometimes we only consider the person being in prison. We need to be able to consider both and be able to do that in a nuanced way as we go into this conversation. America, as many of you probably already know, has a very serious imprisonment problem. And we can go straight to the statistics to see that this is an issue that it's hard to say isn't problematic. There are about 2.3 million people locked up in America today as we speak. That is about a fourth of the world's prison population. Almost 25% of the world's prison population. America is only 5% of the world's population. Again, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. About 190,000 of the people who are imprisoned in America are imprisoned in federal facilities. About 1.3 million of the people imprisoned are in state facilities or in state prisons. Most of them are males. About 93% of those imprisoned are males. Less than 7% are women. The age range where you see the most people imprisoned is between 36 and 40 years of age. And something else that's telling is that in some places, African American males are 10 times more likely than any other group to go to prison. We have some serious disparities that really need to be dealt with. Now, as we look a little bit at the history of this, we need to know that in the 80s, going forward into the 90s and on, our prison population almost quadrupled. And this is because of mandatory sentencing, some of the things that came along with the war on drugs. And you see this huge increase in the people that were, in the amount of people that were going to prison, something we really had to deal with. Now, in addressing this, we need to think about what is the best way to go about it. And we see that on Tuesday, as many of you know, that the Senate actually passed the First Step Act. The First Step Act. And the First Step Act stands for the Formerly Incarcerated Re-Enter Society Transformed Safely Transitioning Every Person Act. And that was passed by the Senate. 87 voted yes and 12 voted no. A huge accomplishment, and I have to point out that the Trump administration really pushed this hard, and in a time when we are so polarized along partisan lines, for them to be able to do anything, especially something this substantive, is a big deal, and we should all recognize it. Now, the First Step Act in general is kind of aimed at decreasing the amount of people in federal prisons. Right? And one of the ways that they go about this is through giving judges more discretion when it comes to sentencing non-violent offenders. And so when somebody comes in, the judge can look at mitigating circumstances and other things and say, I think this amount of time fits the crime, rather than this mandatory sentence, which really made our prison population skyrocket. They have some discretion in that. Something else that it does is it takes away the disparities that we saw between those who were prosecuted for crack cocaine and those who were prosecuted for powder cocaine. That's a big deal that has some racial implications as well. And so it's good to see that happened. Something that was big to me is it is supportive of rehabilitation and vocational programs, making sure that once people get out of prison, they can actually be productive citizens. And this is important because when people are in prison, they're taken away from their families, they're taken away from jobs, and we want them to re-enter society and be productive. Give them that opportunity. That's important. Give them a chance at redemption, so to speak. So that's big. Something else that happened, there are several things. I'm not going to go through everything that this does, but something else is that there's a ban on shackling pregnant women. And so that's also in there. Now, note, this only applies to federal prisons. This does not apply to state prisons. And if you were listening to what I said earlier, the great majority of people, 1.3 million, are in state prisons and not federal prisons. So what this tells us is we have a whole lot of work to do. Now, even in the federal prison system, there's still a lot of reform that needs to be done after this. It's called the First Step Act because it really is just the first step. There are a lot of other things that can be done, that need to be done, but we should not take it lightly. It's still a huge first step. So what can we take from this? What we can take from this is a good starting place, but all of us need to be making sure that our state legislatures are doing things in regard to criminal justice and imprisonment too. We need to be contacting our governors, contacting our state legislators, especially those who are on the committees that deal with criminal justice and deal with imprisonment. They should hear our voices. They should know that this is a priority for us. That's something that we can really move forward on. But let me also say this. The criminal justice system and criminal justice in general is never going to be a perfect science. And we can see throughout history, people have had good intentions and it's just gone wrong. And so criminal justice is one of those issues that we need to always be monitoring, always looking for disparities, always looking to see how we can reform and improve it, because the consequences are just so dire. And this is such a serious issue that we need to make sure that people aren't going to prison unnecessarily or staying longer than they need to be staying. This is why in our criminal justice system, we say, that you are innocent and proven guilty. And this is why the burden is on the prosecutor to prove their case. The burden is on the state, because we know that it's not a perfect science, and we want to err on the side of not putting people in prison unnecessarily or keeping them there too long. Something to keep in mind. But let me end with this. I do have to give a shout out to the Trump administration. I know a lot of people are hard on the Trump administration, and for good reason. A lot of people are hard on evangelicals that supported Trump, and in many instances for good reason. But this would not have been passed without them. So whether you agree with Trump, or you agree with the Christians who support him, you have to give credit and props where credit and props are due. Because if you don't, then you're not being an honest player in the system, and you're actually hurting things. When you're asking people to do better and you're asking them to take certain stances, if they do the right thing, whether you like them or not, whether they're on your side or not, you need to admit they did the right thing and give them credit for that. If not, you're not incentivizing people working together. You're not incentivizing people doing the right thing. So shout out to the Trump administration. This is something that they did that is substantive, that is good for everyone across the nation. And we need to recognize that. Shout out also to Trump supporting evangelicals who, if they didn't push this hard for several months moving forward, this would not have passed. There were people who were trying to slow this down, and they really stepped in to say this needs to pass. So we can disagree on other things, but we're going to give credit where credit is due. And so this is a good first step. We want to make sure that we keep it moving. If you like this, if you like the information that you got through this civic update, please listen to the Church Politics Podcast with myself and Michael Ware as we talk about these issues in a lot more depth. And it's something that you can get every week about a whole bunch of different issues. Take care, and I will see you next week.